We are already seeing signs of how Thomas Frank's Spurs are going to look to build up next season. After our first friendly yesterday against Reading, 2-0 win, we saw evident details around the way that Spurs built up that we know Thomas Frank is going to build off. And I think it's super exciting. It's very different from what we saw last season. Obviously, I've been away from YouTube for a while, so it'd be great if whoever enjoys this video, please leave it a like. Also subscribe. We're going to be bringing lots and lots of content consistently this season around the details and the analysis of Thomas Frank Spurs, and a lot of also youth development stuff. So keep an eye out for the videos coming. But let's get into a few things that I noticed yesterday, even just one game in, which we can be really excited for tactically with Thomas Frank's new setup. So if we go into how we actually set up in that first half, obviously there was two completely different lineups in the first half to the second half. So let's just focus on the first half for now. We had what would look like on paper a traditional 4-2-3-1. We had Kinski in goal. The fullbacks were Porro and Udogie, Danso left centre-back, Romero right centre-back, double pivot of Bentancur and Sarr, Devine in the 10, Johnson on the right and Moore on the left with Solanke up front. But pretty early into the game, I noticed the usage of the fullbacks being not as maybe most people expected. I think a lot of people expected Porro and Udogie to both be bombing on, as they are both pretty proficient in different ways in attack. But we actually saw something more like this, where Porro sat in deep, forming that back three in build-up. We had Bentancur and Sarr sort of as that two in front. And we saw Udogie really create that width and also playing pretty high up here in these areas here. And I think there's a couple reasons why Frank opted for it this way around. I think me included and some other people thought that maybe it would be more like this, with Udogie dropping deeper and Porro being the one to provide the more attacking impetus. But I think one of the main reasons for this was I think Porro's ability to pass the ball was really, I think maybe less so yesterday, but will be really important in the way we build up, especially as we don't have the greatest passers in midfield necessarily. So I think Porro playing in this deeper role allows him to pick passes through the lines to really break through that press. And we know Udogie isn't necessarily as good of a passer as Porro, so let's get him higher using his athleticism, which I know and we all know is one of his strengths, and have Porro kind of in this deep build-up shape to break through the opposition. I think this 3-2 shape was pretty pretty similar to how De Zerbi used to set up at Brighton. His was more of a 4-2 shape, but in terms of the principles, I think there was a lot of De Zerbiism in the way we played yesterday. Which was a lot of bounce passes into the centre mid and bouncing it back to the centre back. Same with Sarr, playing it into him and bouncing it back to maybe Porro or one of the centre backs. And I think the reason for this is to really attract pressure on that back three to entice the opposition to come and press. Once they do come and press, you can play through them pretty much. So if we take a look at some of these stills here, which is evident that we were kind of picking up that 3-2 shape, as we see Porro over there in the sort of right centre-back-ish role. So that's the shape there. But I think what we saw a lot of is playing into the midfield too, bouncing it back. And what that does is it really entices the midfielders to come and press. It's like you're almost teasing them, playing it into midfield and then popping it back as if they might have more of a chance to go and win it. And we also saw at times when they did bump it back to the centre-backs is Romero just standing on the ball. And this is a really common theme in De Zerbi ball, where the centre-back literally stands on it for a few seconds and waits basically until he's pressed. Once he does receive that pressure, the types of players like Romero, who are so good at passing the ball through the lines, can find those passes and really turn the opposition round. And so I think that was evident in the way we built up. I think Porro has real plus sides in playing in this position. I think the concerns with me around Porro playing here, there's a few. I think first concern is, can he be patient enough to constantly build? I think Porro is a very vertical player. He wants to constantly be breaking lines, constantly be looking for that killer pass. And I think at times this system, especially against opposition that are willing to come and press, Frank's going to want some slow, patient build-up to really create the spaces for the attackers once we do play through. And I think Porro at times can get a bit over-eager, a bit overexcited to be the hero to open the opposition up. So that's one concern. I think the other concern with Porro is turnovers. So if we do lose the ball, he is pretty exposed here. I think having Sarr there does lift some of that concern because his legs are brilliant. He can come and cover over here. But let's say Sarr's kind of caught up here and the ball gets turned over. Then we're looking at Porro really isolated. And we know his 1v1 defending has improved, but he's not as good a one-on-one defender as, let's say, Udogie over here. So I think those are the main concerns. But what the plus side is of that is we are lacking passes from deep. And I think Porro really does help us in progression. We saw a couple of times yesterday in the way that he can put the ball exactly where he wants it. At times he looked to Johnson in behind when he kind of made a run. He clipped one over the top. I think at times he was able to punch passes through into Devine, also into Sarr. And then obviously Romero in that central role is an absolute cheat code in build-up. He amazes me every time I watch him. Literally, his passing ability, the ability to just literally stop the ball and wait and wait and wait. And as soon as that gap opens up, bang, through the lines. And that changes the whole picture of the game. So I think Romero and Porro in those positions is great for our build-up. The only concern was kind of Danso having all this space to kind of operate in on the ball. He can be a bit clunky at times. I think someone like Van de Ven there, much more cleaner in possession and also able to manage this big space with Udogie pushing up here. So I think Van de Ven there really does work, and I think he can use his carries, if it is Van de Ven, to kind of open up that space and drive into midfield, especially when there's less passing options for him here. And then we saw Udogie, I think, was our best player yesterday. His athleticism, he looks back to his athletic best. He was kind of constantly running up and the line, using that real energy and burst and physicality to knock players off balance when he was driving with it. I think he was excellent. I think he's the kind of player you do want to kind of operate on this whole flank. It also allowed Moore to kind of go into these pockets, which suits him better because he's not the most athletic, but a really tidy technician. So he's the kind of player you want in the pocket. So that dynamic, I think, worked pretty nicely. And we know Udogie can literally charge up that line within an instant. So I think the back four did work. I think there are some concerns around what I said with Porro. But overall, I think it was a really nice dynamic. But that kind of moves me on to my second point I wanted to discuss, which was pretty much the issue we have in midfield and have had for a while in midfield, and that's the lack of a progressive passer. I think all of our midfielders are very much dribble first midfielders, and I think we are really missing someone that can punch the ball through the lines. And if we go on to some of these stills, I think this is a great example here. So we see Alfie Devine in the 10 position there, and Bentancur's got the ball, and obviously they've been instructed to be patient and pop the ball back to the centre backs often to kind of entice the press. But what I want from a midfielder at times is the ability to just get one look up and punch the ball through to the number 10 or to whoever it is the option. And I think that was evident yesterday, where there was a lot of opportunities for the likes of Bentancur and Sarr to play through the lines and really change the picture of the whole game. And they didn't do it. And I think that's just not really in their nature. And that's why the links to kind of Adam Wharton, I think, are being reported. He's someone who can play off 1 and 2 touch and really change the picture with those kind of passes. And it's why I think we are still desperate for a midfielder that can play good passes from midfield, break lines with passes, not carries, because we have those. I think someone who can really play off 1 and 2 touch, control the tempo, really break lines with incisive passes, but also the ability to switch play. I think Bentancur did switch play pretty nicely yesterday, but I think he lacked those kind of incisive line-breaking passes. So that's something I think we need to keep an eye on in the transfer window. I think they should be targeting someone that can pass from deep. I think we've lacked that for a long time, and our build-up is so reliant on the likes of Romero and Porro. And like I said, that's possibly why Porro was kind of kept in this role. I think that's a big part of it, is his ball progression. But we do want one midfielder who can after the first phase of build-up, once they get it in the midfield, can they now break the lines to play the likes of Moore, Devine, Johnson and Solanke? So that's something we need to look out for in the transfer window. And then the final point from the first half that I wanted to touch on is the number 10 position. And I think this is something that's really, really interesting. So if you can see here, we can see the position that Alfie Devine at the top of your picture is picking up. He's really dropping into the kind of right side of midfield. And I think that's a key point, that it's the right side, not the left side. He also does it here. Look, he's right by the touchline. And I think there's a key reason for this. So if we look at the gap that's left between Porro and Johnson, you have Porro obviously sitting in as that right back. But we know Johnson, he wants to be on the last line. He wants to be making these runs here. And what we find when that's the case is there's a massive gap between Porro and Johnson. So progression there is going to be pretty difficult to kind of get Johnson the ball. There's a massive gap to basically be occupied. So I think we've seen this at Brentford under Thomas Frank with Damsgaard. He did a lot of this work. But what we see is kind of the double pivot staying where they are, and the 10 kind of drops into these wide areas to really help progress that pass. And so instead of having Johnson coming deep here, which is not where we want him, we want Johnson and a lot of our wide forwards, we want them in the last line. We have Devine drop into these areas, or whoever the number 10 is, I think, depending on who it's going to be. I think we'll see a lot of this. So they kind of drop in to make a little bit of a midfield three. And then that really aids the progression of the team. The issue with that at times is that obviously then the 10 space is not occupied. So what I really like from a player here is the ability to receive it in these areas where it's a bit wider, where it's in here, and then really carry the ball. And I think that is going to be vital. I think Damsgaard was very good at that. The ability to drive and then you're kind of operating in two different positions here. So you pick it up in the sort of more traditional central midfielder role, but then you're carrying it into the 10 areas. You may get, depending on who the winger is, I think if it's someone like Mikey Moore here, then you may get him kind of operating in these areas and Udogie kind of providing the width here. But I think that more often than not, it's going to be a Tell here, possibly a Son here, Odebeck could do it as well, to be fair. But I think what really excites me about the likes of both Maddison and Gibbs-White, if Gibbs-White goes through in this position, is their ability to come deep and then really drive the ball, especially Gibbs-White. He's powerful, he's athletic, he's a great carrier of the ball, and he can kind of be the man to drop in here, but then really progress the ball into these 10 areas. So I think that's something to note on the number 10. I think that's going to be a massive part of how we create chances. I think Kulusevski would be pretty good at that as well, although I don't think he's as good of a receiver in these areas as the likes of Gibbs-White and Maddison, although he's more of a powerful carrier than Maddison. So there's different attributes of all the number 10s that potentially could be playing there. I think Devine did a decent job at this, but I think obviously there's a level that we need, and I don't think he'll get that many minutes this season. But yeah, so I think that's the main point I discovered on the number 10 yesterday. I did think this was going to be a bit of a problem, this gap here between Porro and Johnson. So I expected a midfielder to drop into here, which was evident. So I think that's something definitely to note. In the second half, we saw a bit of a change in terms of shape, and I was quite surprised by this, to be fair, but I think it was evident that we were playing a little bit more of a 4-3-3 shape. We had a single pivot in Basuma, and we had Donley playing this sort of number 8/number 10 role in the left channel, and we had Bergvall as a sort of deeper number 8 on the right channel. We had Son kind of playing as a touchline winger out wide, with Spence kind of creating the width on the right-hand side, with Kudus picking up the pockets, Lancashire as a 9, and then the back three with Davies as kind of more third centre-back on the left, Van der Ven in the middle, and Vuskovic on the right with Vicario in goal. So I think this didn't necessarily optimise some of our players. I think Frank probably wanted to experiment with how he might use a single pivot. I think Basuma's one of the only players in the squad that could potentially do this, and I think it's likely he's going to move on. But I think there's so much responsibility on the single pivot to be able to receive it under pressure and turn out of that pressure. When there's a double pivot, there's much more space for the opposition to cover. So it's often easier for them to turn out because they have less pressure on them, and they're not the only one being marked pretty much. So I think Bissouma's the only one that can really do this. He's great under pressure, but we know he has his faults as well. So I think he wanted to experiment with it. I think Donnelly struggled a little bit with kind of receiving in these areas and then needing the athleticism to kind of drive. I don't think Son was necessarily helpful. I think Son really struggled as well. But there were certain dynamics I liked, and I think I'm mainly going to talk about two players here. But I think the Kudus and Spence dynamic was really nice. I think Kudus, this is the kind of areas you want him in, the pockets. I think he can also pull out wide here and provide width, which is really nice. But he's also comfortable in the central areas. I think Spence and him had a really nice dynamic. And then Vuskovic was obviously the other player I wanted to talk about. I don't necessarily think these roles optimise both the centre-backs. I would like it this way around, obviously with Van der Ven on the left. So if we did it more like that, let's say. With Van der Ven, he's happy to defend big spaces. And I think with Vuskovic, you want him in the centre. You want Vuskovic in the centre for a couple of reasons. If I sort of talk about Vuskovic first, I think Vuskovic is a wonderful player. I think on the ball, off both feet, his ability to put passes through, but also switch it really nice and long. He's got great passing range. And I think if you have someone like that in the centre, it's kind of centre of this, let's say, back three, him off both feet is such a cheat code because you just don't know which angle he's going to play at. He can play left, he can play right. So I think that optimises him more, and it also allows him to be more protected because his main fault is his kind of agility and athleticism. So you don't want him defending these big channels here because he can get turned inside out. So I think what's really nice is if you have a bit of protection for him. The third reason I like him in the centre is his aerial ability. So you always want your best header of the ball in the centre because that's where the most aerial balls are going to land at. Vuskovic is a beast in the air. We saw that on the kind of offensive side of the game. And I think, obviously, goal and assist, the way he took that second goal was like a striker. And that shows his technical quality off both feet. That was his weaker left foot. I was really impressed with him. I was really impressed with him defensively as well. I think the way he manages distances, he senses danger, but not aggressively, not like recklessly. He always knows kind of the distances to keep. If one of his, if his centre-back partner, let's say Van der Ven is pressing over here, he won't just kind of go and cover this space, but he'll cover it to a good extent where he's still comfortable knowing where the striker might be to go in behind him. He's just got a really good sense of defending, and I'm really excited about Vuskovic. And we saw that kind of aerial prowess in the attacking third, but his aerial press in his own box is just brilliant. And then the last player I want to talk about is obviously Mohammed Kudus. I think Spurs have been screaming for a player like this for so long. The player with just that wow factor, the ability to kind of receive it under pressure, turn out of pressure, really absorb contact so well, ride challenges, rapid over short distances, rapid over long distances as well. I think we saw one little clip of him on the right hand side, which was something non-human, if I'm honest. Like the ability to get out of tight areas, so comfortable on the ball. I think he is going to be such a key player in kind of retaining the ball as well when we want to kind of get pressure off us. You can kind of whip the ball into his feet and he's comfortable. He'll hold on to it, let the team get up the pitch. And yeah, I think he was brilliant yesterday. I think his versatility is also great. So as we've seen, Frank wants to be really flexible in the way he's using all these players. They might traditionally look like he's playing on the right wing, but he's actually in the pockets, or vice versa. He might be a number 10, but he's kind of pulling out here. And I think Kudus' versatility will be really, really key here. He's just a player that's I think going to impress everyone. And then his off the ball work was fantastic as well. And I think he's going to be a revelation for Spurs. I really do. I think we've lacked a player that's really that exciting for a long time, and I think I'm super excited about Kudus. So yeah, that was kind of the main things that I took from the game. I'm really excited with where Frank is going to be building this squad. We've obviously still got players to come back into the squad, the likes of Tell, Odebear and Archie Gray. I'm really excited about all three of those. I think they can play a key role in this season. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of pre-season. I think we'll see some more tactical adaptations, which I'll obviously look to analyze as well. But if you've enjoyed the video, please subscribe, please like the video, please share it with all your friends as well. We're trying to build this YouTube channel back up. We're going to be super consistent. And also let me know in the comments what you'd like to see me analyze. I'm not just going to analyze games, I'm going to analyze individual players as well. So individual players, sort of tactical patterns that we see. So anything you guys want me to kind of work on, please let me know in the comments, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.